Hello folks and welcome to today's show on Our Game with myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as ever by Michael Verney, who have a huge amount of stuff coming. Michael, there's more county finals than you could swing. What would you swing? You could swing a stick at, I suppose.
Yeah, serious amount of finals this weekend, Shane. Yeah, and a couple of interesting semi-finals and even quarter-finals in Galway, prelim quarter-finals. So yeah, there's a couple of real top-class county finals on Sunday in particular. I'd say the two games on TV, TG4 usually get it right, and they've definitely gotten it right on Sunday with the two games they've picked. And we go into big detail, and there's loads of stuff even outside of outside of the club action, Shane. So much inter-county news and different things going on as well.
Yeah, and we want people to get their comments in, as we always do, and let us know what you think. Just as we were prepared for the show there, I was up against the clock trying to get stuff ready. I didn't even have a chance to hit the good Freddo bar. Would you rate it?
I'd rate Freddo. I was just talking recently to you. The animal bar would have been an old favourite as well. Yeah, Iggy the iguana and Lizzie the lizard and all these ones.
Just a reminder, we have a couple of Our Game coaching clinics coming up. This weekend, we've got the coaching clinic in Father Manning Gales in Longford. Now, on the poster, we have Oisin McConville, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, he isn't available. But the new Longford football manager, Paddy Christie, it'll be a first taste of Paddy Christie for any of the locals or people in the adjoining areas that want to come and see him. We also have Colin Nally, who's been the Meath coach for the last couple of years, and Davy Burke, who led the Kildare under-20s to All-Ireland success a few years ago and is also over Wicklow in recent times. So that's at Father Manning Gales. And then next week, this is going to be an absolute cracker. Shane Dowling, Dan Shanahan and Richie Power are all going to be in Naas GAA Club. That's Friday, October 21st, 7:30 p.m. They're going to be absolute crackers. But you want to get to the first bit of news that you want to talk about from this kind of week of GAA.
Yeah, no, but there's so much different news. I just thought one of the real interesting things to come out. I know we'd heard about the size hurl that Sean Finn uses, and he used a 37 a couple of years ago. But the fact that he uses a 36 when he's playing corner back, and he uses a 33 when he plays centre back for Brough, I just found that absolutely fascinating. I think I don't know if I'd be able to make that switch, because in my head it would seem like it seems like such a big thing to change, but he's obviously able to do it seamlessly, and it's kind of cool just to see how much thought even he puts into it. That a cornerback, he needs to be able to hook a block a lot more, needs a big hurl, needs to get that extra inch in for the block, whereas at centre back, let's call it a spade, you're more of a ball player. You're hurling the ball a lot more than a man. You're not stopping a man. I just thought that was interesting. I've never really heard of that too much before. Such a big shift from inter-county to club with, the most important implement at your disposal.
Do you think that part of it is down to players normally that are his height profile? So I'm guessing he's 5'9", 5'10", something like that. I hope I'm not wrong in him. But normally a player like that is going to have a 34 size hurley or something. And you don't really go that much bigger, like 35, 36, because generally it would just be imbalanced to you that generally the bigger man would be stronger or just taller or whatever. So you'd be more suited to that. But because the likes of him, he's an absolute tank that, lifting up a size 36 hurley and moving it around to hook, it's not going to take much out of him. So it's easier to do. And then when he's in centre back, where you've got players 360 degrees around you, which is obviously different to the full back line, having that shorter stick for knocking the ball around the place in different directions helps. Even Aaron Gillan, it looks like, we talked to him not so long ago about his hurley. It looks like he has a spoon. And you see some forwards these days and they have small little hurleys. And maybe it's just to get away from getting hooked. But I would find it odd. There's goalkeepers out there, some of them probably have artificial hurleys for puckouts, but they have the ash then for in play because it's probably got that slightly better touch. So, but it's probably not a surprise that it's moving in that direction either. At the same time, players are always looking for marginal gains.
I just think it's interesting you mentioned his height there. He's not small, but he's not 6 foot. So he reckoned himself that he was always, a lot of the time, that he was missing the ball by an inch or so when he was going for a block. So I think it makes total sense there. And when now listen, if I was using a big 36, 37, I'd feel like when I was going to pick up the ball that I was falling around the place or I was jabbing the toe in the ground or something like that. It's obviously, that's what I always found. And my test for, there's different tests for what length of hurl you're supposed to be using. Mine would have always been, I would just loosen my arm and see, can I dribble a ball one-handed along the ground? Am I hitting the top of the ball? If I am, my hurl is slightly too short. Am I hitting the ground first? If I am, my hurl is slightly too long. That was the way I always worked. But to say that he was using a 37 a couple of years ago is it's mad. It's not something you'd notice the shorter hurl a lot easier than you would the longer one, but it makes sense from his point of view. And like, there are a few better players in the game to reach in and get a flick in and to get a block, and even to get my favorite block in hurling by a mile, the distance block, where the man has actually gotten the strike away, but you have the hurl there, and the ball is going to go, like, the ball is moving in transit, and your hurl is exactly where you think the ball is going to go, and you get a block in. It's the greatest sickener for a forward, because you've actually gotten the ball away, you're happy with your strike, and all of a sudden this hurl comes in and gets the ball maybe when it's 10 yards in motion already. That's definitely my favourite block.
Yeah, I noticed, I remember Oisin Goff did a block like that on one of the Fennelly brothers many moons ago, could be 10 years ago at this stage. I think he had it as his profile picture for a while, but it was very cool. I think the slow-mo, the slow-mo cameras these days and the Super HD, they've added to it and how that looks. It looks class, and sometimes the hurley will even break with the connection. Yeah, it's glorious. A few comments coming in. Adrian McGrath, Scarra Faganalo, Munster Camogie champions going for 2 in a row in Clare on Saturday. TV Street says, I had noticed a few times that Finn's hurley seemed extra long. A good long stick for baiting cattle, I suppose. And why not? Or going after the hares. Baiting the ditches and going, hi shaha.
Well, just when you're going after cattle, like, a short hurl is absolutely no use to you going for cattle, because you need to be able to reach in and make sure you're not going to get a kick in your puss as well. So the 37 or 38, I have a couple of hurls that you use going for, you wouldn't be going baiting cattle, but just going round and in cattle. I'd say if I used any of it in a match, like big lump of cow SH1T all over the boss. If anybody saw me coming during a match, I remember I showed you the old-fashioned stick I had before, the 1950 stick with the, remember we used it when we were showing the Brendan Matter pint a couple of years ago. Brian Gatt, who made it, said it to me. He'd give it to me for free if I started a championship match with that hurl. Imagine the fear of God in a young lad if he stood in behind you and you were waving this yoke. I'll get it down a second when I'm off screen, because you'd literally, like, a young lad would literally think, what is this? This lad is going to kill me today.
Yeah. Go on, you go and get that, and I'll read out a little bit about the Munster Senior Hurling Championship. Right, so this is the next news point. So Kerry, there's talks of entering the Senior Hurling Championship. So the story goes as follows. The prospect of playing the Munster Senior Hurling Championship is a card for Kerry, but manager Stephen Malumphey knows it will take a massive effort to qualify for it. The Munster Council have confirmed their intention to invite the Kingdom to compete in the province's Senior Hurling Championship should they win the Joe McDonagh Cup. A motion to the effect will have to be passed at Congress in February, but it would appear to be a done deal. We have to win it first. He says you have to earn the right to be in Tier 1. We have a selector with us, Brendan O'Sullivan, probably one of the best forwards Kerry have ever had. He played nothing but Tier 1. Let's see. His whole career was Liam McCarthy, and he'd remind us on a weekly basis how they knocked out Waterford in 1993. This year against Wexford was the first time in 17 years that we got back to playing in Tier 1 against Wexford. The atmosphere in Austin Stack Park that day was phenomenal. The passion from the supporters was great. The game went away from us in the second half, but the lads were saying it stays like that. They want more of. I know there's a big gulf between Tier 1 and Tier 2, but when you get up and you're in it, yeah, you pick up the pace. If you're minors and under 20s, then feed into that. The rewards are everywhere, but first we have to win the Joe McDonagh Cup. And look, I've said this a million times before, playing in the All-Ireland Club final against the Piershig, like, I hadn't experienced that type of intensity before, but then you go away, you think about it, you prepare for what it's going to be like the next time. And I think it does help. I'm not saying, geez, all of a sudden you're brilliant, but it does help you even understanding what it feels like to then try and think, how do I need to prepare for the next time I'm at that level?
100%, yeah. You realise, okay, I think I've been committed. I think I've been X, Y, and Z. This is the next level. This is what I've been exposed to. So I need to change X, Y, and Z. I need to put in more time doing certain skills. I need to work on my fit and speed a bit more. I need to work on whatever. It steals you for that. And I think a lot of the time, generally, the vast majority of players will get a taste for that, and they will love it, and they will love the idea of going toe to toe with someone at that level. But I just think the idea of that ridiculous trapdoor, how it was even there in the first place, the fact that they would have to play a playoff should they win the Joe McDonagh to get into Munster, is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm just glad that it looks like hopefully at Congress next year it will be out of the way. And this is the baby I was talking about there just a minute ago. Absolutely. Like, imagine standing in beside a young fella now, swinging this thing, or you're standing back getting ready to pull. I'd say they wouldn't come within an ass's roar of you. They wouldn't know what to do with you. Be a great joke, just the heel of it as well. If you got to take a line ball, like, you're guaranteed you're going to get 70 or 80 yards with that. Like, that is,
it's like a shinty stick.
It's not far off it, yeah. It's not far off it. But the sweet spot is obviously an awful lot smaller, as you will see there. But if you did get it right in that middle of the sweet spot there, you know, you're looking at 100 yards. I don't see this breaking either. I think he could swing this 100 times, and I don't see it breaking. It's not far off for slash hook, Joe. Not far off. But it's what lads were using back in the day.
Yeah, you'd be chopping down the old hay fairly handy with that, I'd say. The feck is that joke, says TV Street. Well, sure, he's kind of explained it at this stage. God knows why he has it though. Connor says, "Hi Shane, just wondering if you have a running order and what each coach's team is for the coaching clinic in Longford this Saturday." Well, just to give you some sort of broad outline of it, we're going to start off with a few minutes of an introduction where we'll chat through what each coach is going to be doing. Then we'll give you an opportunity to say whether you want us to try and work something into it. For example, if you wanted something about tackling technique or, I don't know, a transitional play or something like that, we'll try and work that into the session with Davy Burke. I haven't fully narrowed down exactly what he's doing yet because we've brought in Paddy Christie as part of it. We had to rejig it a little bit. Now Paddy's looking at doing stuff involving handling skills, first touch and defensive stuff around the tackle. We'll also be working in stuff in terms of tactical play and definitely in terms of attacking. So we don't have it all completely narrowed down because we had to rejig things nicely, but we will be sorting that out, and there'll be an opportunity for Q&As during the middle of it as well. So Grodo, go crack on, just to move on to another topic. If Kerry were to win the Joe McDonagh and go into a new 16 Munster, how would relegation work the following year? Playoff between the bottom team in the province or Kerry permanently into top tier? I mean, as is often the case, it doesn't feel like that's been totally ironed out yet.
No, definitely not. That's not something that will be ironed out until it actually happens, to be honest with you. They just have the rule there. TV Street says the 2023 halfback hurl. You never know. I'd love to come back and just in about 10 years' time and just come out and play a junior game or something like this with this baby. See how you get on. Lash a ball to the net, maybe.
Well, I don't think it'd make much difference to your game now. You'd be the first to admit that ball striking isn't your thing. So when you're pulling a jersey with your left hand, it doesn't really matter what's in your right hand, does it?
These lads are all you need.
Those lads are superfluous to you. Let's move on to the next bit of news, which is, right, the Irish soccer women, social media, that kind of stuff. Right, so there's been a big fallout, and obviously every player has been straight away apologetic. And that's definitely the best thing to do because there's sponsors involved, the whole lot. You want to keep a fairly clean image to your team. But if we're to call a spade, that song is sang up and down the island. And there's probably very few people in the country who are actually as horrified as you know, you'd be made believe in the last couple of days. And that's not me condoning it, but that is the un-PC real world.
Asher Shane, there's songs sang in every county and every club, probably after various wins and losses, sometimes even that are, you know, not politically correct at all. Listen, you can't condone singing that. I just think a lot of it is a lot to do with the scourge of social media and people, you know, putting stuff out there straight away. Like, to me, I just don't see the need for phones to be anywhere around there. I like having memories in my head. Like, I don't think you need to. I'm not going to a concert and holding my phone up the whole time and trying to get videos and pictures. That's just me anyway. But it was an unbelievable occasion the other night. Amber Barrett's goal, lovely pass through, lovely first touch, beautiful second touch, and an absolute peach of a goal. And her interview after was so poignant as well, I suppose, in the wake of what had happened in her native Donegal in recent days as well. But it's amazing to think we're going to the World Cup. Like, you know, Ireland going to a World Cup of any description is such an unbelievable achievement. And the events thereafter have maybe just taken, they shouldn't have, but they've probably maybe just taken a bit of the, you know, how should you say, a bit of the dust off what is an unbelievable achievement. But I think it'll be quickly forgotten. I think with those sort of things, when you know you've messed up or you made a mistake, you come out and apologize. There's not much more you can do. The Sky interview, I thought, was absolutely ridiculous. You know, you've apologized straight away, and then they're talking, you know, pushing again and talking about there's more education needs to be done.
The cheek of that Sky Sports lad. I mean, talk about it. It's pretty clear he hasn't a clue what he's talking about in terms of the history of our two countries.
Yeah, a lot of the time, Shane, I don't know about you, I find it that it's a lot of the time it's the English that are unaware of their own history.
Not true.
And you know, we're fairly, you know, we've had such a kind of not a checkered history, but we've had such a difficult past in many ways. We're all kind of very clear. Irish people are very clear about where we've come from to where we are now. So we know our history. Whereas, you know, a lot of English people wouldn't wouldn't know what we've gone through over the last 100 years or so, or more.
Did you, when you were going to school, which like in my primary school, my teacher in 5th and 6th class, which isn't today or yesterday, would have been basically preaching anti-British sentiment. Now, I'm not, trying to besmirch the man, but he was very much anti them. Now, he's a big Man United supporter at the same time. But there, so there's a small bit of maybe hypocrisy going on there. But like, we would have grown up being totally made aware of all of that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking the other day when the Sky Sports guy was asking his ridiculous question, imagine the answer he would have got if James McLean was the one he was putting this to.
Yeah. And in fairness, she did very well to hold herself together, because he was pushing, and it was nonsensical what he was asking, really.
He needs education on the poppy and why the likes of McLean, who isn't my favourite person in the world, but like why he should totally not be slammed the way he is.
Yeah, but, totally. But just, I think the one thing we need to talk about is just how brilliant of an achievement it was. And like in 5 years, Irish women's football has just turned on its head completely the other way around. And they play a lovely brand as well. And it was brilliant to watch the other night, I have to say.
Yeah, although at the same time, it feels like a lot of them have been defending the defensive approach. But look, as we often say here, whatever gets you the win. And what a goal from Amber Barrett. The way she toe poked it to the net, it reminded me of Romario back in his glory days with Barcelona and Brazil. So the comments continue to come in. So this is about the 6-team Munster. Imagine the pressure of Tip going to Tralee for their last game after clippings off Clare, Waterford, Limerick and Cork. The cheeky Adrian McGrath. Joe Butler, this is regarding the Irish women's soccer. The whole thing's over the top. Great Cork t-shirt behind you there, Shane. Yeah, that's that. That side, Huggy, Jimmy, Shawnee and Ringy. That will be on sale at the store, the OurGame store, very, very soon. Flash says, GA football rugby teams all sing rebel songs up and down the country. Absolute nonsense controversy. Added that the Leinster rugby players were singing Celtic Symphony not so long ago. Glory Amber and Glory Donegal. Do you want to take over?
Yeah, no, it was a brilliant night, and my brother lives in New Zealand, so I might have to make a little trip. Over next summer to catch that World Cup if at all possible. But that was one of many things that's happened in the last couple of days. Just a couple of quick management updates. So Wicklow have a new hurling manager. Casey O'Brien is back at the helm again. And Oisin McConville has kind of went through his backroom team with the Wicklow footballers. Joe Cowdy will be coach. Gary Duffy, who was obviously joint manager last year, he's coming in as selector. And Paul Kelly, who was with Thomas Davis a couple of years ago and obviously was famously with Nace last year, he's a selector as well. Emer Kelly, S&C, and Des Jennings is performance coach. Des was involved with Armagh in 2002 when they obviously won their one and only All-Ireland when Oisin was playing. Carl McKeegan is also the new Armagh manager. You probably all remember Carl from his days with Antrim, very, very good player. Cushendall, stalwart. I think he was a wing back in the day, wing back, centre back. So he's involved with Armagh. He takes over from his county mate, Terence Sambo McNaughton, who took over last year midway through the season. And it's great to see that hurling was being discussed on Monday Night Football, because that does not happen every day of the week. Roy Keane sticking firmly to his roots, his Cork roots and his hurling roots. And I think you have the clip there, Shane, just of him talking about how no occasion in the world, sporting or otherwise, compares to this.
Again, the weekend, just all enjoyed watching it. I was intrigued by it. And I kind of rugby league. I think rugby league is a really tough sport. I think it's brilliant. And obviously, growing up in Ireland, obviously I'm a big GA fan. Look, the best game to watch a live game, I suppose, a really good game of hurling. If you ever get a chance to go to an All-Ireland, it's a great day, one of the best. So it would be mine. But I like watching most sports. But would you?
But then the fact that he names his top 3 sportsmen went with Muhammad Ali, Jimmy Barry Murphy, and the third one was Barry McGuigan. But yeah, picking out Jimmy Barry Murphy, can you imagine the confusion in the studio there? He probably told them earlier in the day who it was, but the confusion when they're hearing, who's Jimmy Barry Murphy? And then when he told them probably afterwards that, by the way, do you realise that his son has been managing the likes of, I think it was Rochdale in recent years over there?
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? I don't know. Cork people, once a Cork person, always a Cork person. You'll always go batting for Cork. Jimmy Barry is obviously an absolute icon of the GA. They don't get much bigger. Interesting to hear Roy. Roy is just sometimes controversial for the sake of being controversial. He scoffed at Jamie Carragher's they're talking about best 3 sports people of all time, and Carter says Ronnie O'Sullivan, and Roy nearly scoffed as if to say snooker wasn't a sport, and he's been at the crucible several times. I think he's doing a Johnny Pilkington on it, as one of the lads said to me. He's been controversial for the sake of being controversial, because I know he's a big snooker man.
Yeah, I think Ronnie O'Sullivan recently said that he wouldn't be encouraging his kids to play
right,
at all. But you could argue that, look, I love snooker. My cue's just over there, a couple of £100 worth. And I abusing it every time I pick it up. But like, would you say it's more of a game than a sport? Like the way you might say darts is more of a game than a sport.
No.
Doesn't mean it's not competitive, but like, there's no sweating, there's no getting stuck into a lad, there's no, from that point of view, that I'd be thinking, would you say it's more like sitting down playing chess in a way on a bigger table?
No, I think it's the most mentally demanding sport out there, bar none. Because you could play, you could.
Maths is mentally demanding, and it's not a sport.
Yeah, well, obviously you have to have a serious amount of coordination to it as well. And I just think I've never seen anything like, because you've played snooker, and I'm sure lots of our viewers do as well. Imagine like there's no sport where you're not in control of the skills, because your opponent puts you in a certain position. You could be sitting down for 20 minutes while your opponent makes a break, and then you get in, you play a shot, and you're cold, and you could be sitting down again. I'm absolutely fascinated by the mindset of snooker players. I'm absolutely fascinated by Ronnie as well. I just think he's an absolute genius. He made a century break to win the Hong Kong Open last weekend from just all blues, I think, off all the reds. It was absolutely outrageous. We're probably veering into other sports here, but I definitely think snooker is a sport, and I think it's probably the most demanding sport mentally, bar none.
Yeah, so Galway and Kerry have each submitted a request to the Leinster Council seeking inclusion in next year's Provincial Minor Hurling Championship. So this is building on the story we're talking about of Kerry potentially being in the Munster Senior, but then Leinster Minor. And look, everyone's realistic about this. There's a better chance of their teams competing and, giving good teams to some of the teams that aren't regularly winning the Leinster Championship. And I know Offaly and Laois got to the final this past year, but traditionally they'd probably, you'd feel like they'd compete a bit better in there. So yeah, Galway currently plays senior and under 20 in Leinster, but their success at minor grade, winning 4 in a row from 17 to 20 has mitigated against their inclusion. Despite this, Galway feel they're at a disadvantage under the current system, which I would agree. So I think if you put Galway and Munster, that would also be fine. I mean, either way, let's get them included, I would imagine, and as many teams that can compete.
Are we getting closer to Galway clubs competing in probably, well, maybe not Leinster, but are we getting closer to Galway clubs not getting a bye to an All-Ireland semi-final, and potentially Ulster teams in time as well, where it's happening at all other levels? I think it's only a matter of time before it happens at club level as well. Now, that's probably a little bit further down the road, but I think from a Galway point of view, you can say about winning All-Irelands or whatever, and they've been able to do it in spite of coming in cold. But young players want games. They want games to develop more players, get a chance to see more players, expose at that level, see whether, they can get a thirst for it. I think it makes sense on both counts for both counties, I have to say. Massive sense.
Yeah, put it this way, actually. In the Leinster Hurling Championship, if you were to bring in some of the Ulster teams, I mean, how many extra rounds are you going to need? Probably not even an extra round, because often now, and I know Naas are going to be in the senior this year in Leinster, but like, how many extra rounds are you going to need? Maybe one preliminary round extra might be needed, because, you don't have full rounds anyway. There's already teams getting byes, so just let them have games. And in Munster, it's imbalanced at the moment anyway. So if you just threw the Galway club champions in there, what would be wrong with that? Or if it worked out better to throw both the Connacht and the Ulster teams, as in Galway and the Ulster teams, into Leinster or Munster, just make it happen. And then just directly out of those provincial championships comes an All-Ireland final. It would be no harm. SSRI says it's a bit unfair in developing teams like Meath, Westmeath, Offaly, etc., I think. And I presume this in terms of the likes of Kerry and Galway going into the Leinster minor. Would you have a problem with it as an Offaly man?
I wouldn't, Shane, being honest with you, because I think I'd be looking, not necessarily outside of Offaly, I'd be looking at the bigger picture of developing another hurling county a bit more and developing their conveyor belt of talent a bit more. If Kerry are coming in and that's making Leinster more competitive, then that's up to us to up our game as well, and it's up to the Carlows, the Westmeaths, the Kildares as well to up their game. So no, I think it would be a great move, I have to say. Anything, like, we're working off a small population of teams that play really competitive hurling, and whatever Kerry are there now, and they've been in the last couple of McDonagh finals, whatever other hurling counties and provincial councils can do to make them more competitive and make them have a better senior team in time, I think should be done. And I think if we're looking for excuses in Offaly or Westmeath or Carlow for them coming in, then I think you'd be better off focusing on yourself rather than making an excuse for another county. That's just my own opinion on that.
Yeah, and for the likes of Westmeath, I see even just with the freshers there in the last couple of weeks, a couple of Westmeath lads coming through, and I think, yeah, there's good promise, and there's more good hurlers and natural hurlers coming there as well, for example. Aidan McGrath says this is to do with snooker. Anything you can do in formal shoes and a pair of trousers isn't a sport, Verney. It's a game.
I don't know. Like, what do you want me to comment on that? Like, you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
admit that you're wrong. Just say, I'm wrong. It's a game.
I'm definitely not wrong. It's like, to me, it doesn't have to. A sport doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, unbelievably physical demanding. Now, I will say this: the more
you need to have a shower after it, surely.
The more, no, you don't. The more flexible.
No, but you should need to have a shower after a sport.
The more flexible you are, you know, the better snooker player you're going to be. Ronnie's very, you know, he's got great flexibility around the table. He's able to get in certain positions. Like, you see snooker players that are of the heavier variety struggling to play certain shots, struggling also with the mental demands of longer games. And I'd say probably something similar in golf as well. And it would tell towards the end of a major competition, maybe. So I don't agree with that at all. And I'm sure the lads would love to be wearing shorts and t-shirts, but they're not allowed under rules, under the Snooker and Billiards Association rules.
Well, I'd be happy to blow your point about golf out of the park, especially because all you have to do is look over the road in Offaly and you'll see, you know, he's not exactly got a six-pack and he's going winning massive titles. So, you know, I don't agree with you on that point. I mean, snooker players, some of them are short, so it's difficult to play some shots. Some are carrying a bit more, so it's difficult. You know, different, all shapes and sizes, and they're playing a lovely little game because it's not a sport, and I love it.
You don't think it's a sport?
No, I don't.
I actually think you're 100% just playing devil's advocate this morning, just to annoy me, and you'll come on.
Would I do that?
You'll come on next week and be like, snooker's a great sport, one of the best sports there ever was. I would challenge anybody to find a more mentally demanding sport than snooker.
So what about the inter-county exodus that we're seeing? Dublin, Offaly, Kildare, they're all being left short, and plenty of other counties. By the way, people, get your comments in. Let us know what matches you're looking forward to this weekend. Any comments on any of the topics we've had so far. We love getting your comments in, and it helps grow the show. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do, because it helps build the numbers all the time and grow the show. But are you, like, I have no issue with any player taking time away, because all of these players who have played for any length of time, they're putting in serious commitment and they're totally entitled to do what they want with their lives.
Yeah, no, I have no issue with it at all. I think it's a direct consequence of COVID, realistically. I have to say, I do think it's a direct consequence of COVID. Like, how much of a thirst did you have to travel the second you got a chance to, once the COVID restrictions were lifted? I know, like, I was, like, I'm not being smart, and I have no problem saying it. That 5K thing absolutely went out the window at me, and I was traveling the length and breadth of the country, going hiking mountains and stuff like that. I have no issue with saying that, and I felt like, you know, I had cabin fever during the whole thing. The second I got a chance to go, I went to Vegas actually in the middle of COVID. Got a great deal, by the way, because nobody was traveling. The flights that were supposed to be 13 hours ended up being about 25 hours, with about 6 layovers. But I just had a massive thirst to travel, and I'd imagine a lot of inter-county players who have, you know, dedicated their lives probably to hurling or football. The chances now arisen to go somewhere for a year, like Liam Rush, Chris Crummy, Keane O'Callaghan in Dublin being examples. Paddy Dunnigan in Offaly has been is another example. There's, like, go through it. You'll see over the next 6 weeks to 2 months the amount of lads that are not committing to county squads because they want to go here or they want to go there. You'd Kieran Connolly and Brian O'Mara last year in Tip because, you know, the summer prospect of going to the States. And I think it's going to be more and more. It's going to get more and more common. Like, Liam Kearns is coming into Offaly now. There's questions marks about whether Johnny Maloney, this year's captain, will be involved as well because he's living in Galway, and that you're coming into a setup and you're not sure what you're getting when you get there unless you've had conversations with all your players. So to me, like, and I know I talked about Liam Kearns with Offaly technically wasn't starting when I said it a few months ago. He wasn't starting until December the 8th. I think that's November 24 now. But how you will get on in the league and championship will a lot depend on the conversations you have with players now, and potentially being able to, you know, coax a lad from going traveling. I'm not necessarily saying that's what you do, but a lot of what happens over the next 6 weeks to 2 months will determine the standard of squad that you have going forward in 2023 and where you're going to go in 2023 and beyond. So I've no problem with lads taking time out, and I think it's a natural thing that's going to happen after lads been cooped up for a couple of years and not been able to go anywhere.
Yeah, Joe, it actually took me a little while to actually get up and go and do a small bit of traveling. Went away for those couple of weeks, and then was in Amsterdam last weekend, and it starts to be like, oh yeah, I used to do this all the time. So I don't blame any player, especially after the ridiculous lockdown rules that went on for so long. I mean, the country just went absolutely insane, and they're unapologetic about it, even though they should be. But then you see, like, it's happening in both male and female GAA, and you see some players that would have headed out during the lockdown era. I suppose I'm thinking of Orla Dwyer, Wench, Nate Goldrick. I see Anya McDonough of Galway heading out now. And geez, you couldn't blame any of them. So anyone who can get away and enjoy a summer away, I would say, yeah, I know it's going to be tough for the club or the county or whatever, but you kind of have to look after number one as well, especially if you're going to be committing for several other years as well. I wouldn't see any issue with that.
Just on that, Shane, as well, you can't, to me, you can't deny someone what they want to do. And if you try, and a lot of the time, if a manager or a club manager or whatever, they try and force people to stay or whatever, you just end up browned off with the club, browned off with the game. You think you shouldn't be there, and potentially you could walk away from the game. So if somebody is very strong on going, you have to remember as well, there are wives, girlfriends and families involved here. A lot of very I would say patient people that have partners involved in inter-county GAA in particular. And there's promises probably made to these people that we're going to go away here or there. I think there was a good interview with Kieran Bennett. Vincent Hogan did it last week, just about, he said, if I don't go now, when am I going to go? I have a thirst to go. Self and his girlfriend went over to Australia. He actually said one of the big people in making the decision with him was Peter Duggan. He talked to Peter Duggan a lot, who went away for 3 years, and because they were mates in LIT. So I just think it's more and more acceptable now, and that it's just a nature. It's a societal issue as well, not an issue, but it's a societal thing. People are no longer. You can go to Australia, you can go to New Zealand, you can go to America very, very easily, and people want to see the world and not be stuck in their own bubble of the GAA.
Yeah, but you're not necessarily going to hit the ground running when you come back. I mean, Peter Duggan did have some good games early on in Munster, but he certainly struggled towards the end and heading into the All-Ireland series. Now, he's a really good player, and I'm no doubt he'll have a very good year next year. In 2018, he was brilliant and all that kind of stuff. But I do think there's no guarantee of hitting the absolute top level when you've been away from such an elite level sport for a bit of time.
Yeah, I think a year is fine. I think 2 to 3 years, I think it's very difficult to come back in at the levels you're at. And a lot of it has to do with your age as well. If you're going traveling at 21 or 22, I think that's okay. If you're going traveling in your late 20s, I think it's harder to come back in, having taken a year out. So I even think it'll be interesting with some of those, probably Liam Rush in particular, whether he does come back to inter-county thereafter, or whether he sees he's been away for a year out, he's 33, he's had a lot of injuries, maybe he'll potentially reconsider his inter-county future after being away for a year. I think that'll be interesting. I think Crummy and Keane O'Callaghan probably are of the ages where they can come back in seamlessly enough.
Yeah, Emerald 90 says all hurling clubs in Ulster outside of Antrim Down and maybe Derry maybe should be put into a tougher competition. Yeah, I mean, as anything that can be done to bring them up, for sure, assuming they want to. Fergus Butler, best of luck to the Owen Rua hurlers versus Ballinascreen in the Derry Intermediate final this Sunday. Snooker, very skillful and all about angles and shot placement. Let's see, some players benefit a lot mentally and physically from doing a total detox from their sports at times. Yeah, hunger is a great sauce. Do you want to talk a bit about Harty Cup?
Yeah. Obviously, loads of Harty Cup action over the last couple of days. Just fly through a couple of the results quickly. So in Group A, CBC Cork beat Gaelic to 219 to 16 points. Middleton's Mikey Finn on fire there with 1-8. In Group B, Thurles CBS had a convincing win over Rochestown College, 320 to 2-9. And Our Ladies Templemore had a good win over Public-Skull Trinidad, it's not the easiest one to pronounce. Trinidad in Youghal, 129 to 114. It's an amazing the scores that are put up even now in underage matches. It's phenomenal. One of the games of the weekend was definitely Cashel Community School getting the better of St. Flannan's, 512 to 219. Ben Curran scored 4 goals, while Roland Connolly scored 9 points. And in Group D, the points were shared between Middleton CBS and St. Coleman's Fermoy. The Battle of Cork there, 20 points apiece. All-Ireland minor winner Jack Leahy, Middleton, and Jamie Magner, St. Coleman's, We're both in red hot form with 11 points each. I think it's time to get stuck into the meat and drink of the club action for this weekend.
You can be sure of it. So Ballyhale looking to complete a 5 in a row in Kilkenny, and James Stephens standing in their way. James Stephens pushed them really close a couple of years ago. But no matter what way you kind of turn this around, when you start looking at the matchups and you look at who's going to pick up Owen Cody, who's going to pick up TJ Reid, oh, damn, Ronan Corcoran's in great form. What about Joey Holden, Richie Reid? Oh, we haven't even talked about Colin Fennelly. Not to mind the likes of, Niall Shorthall. Is it Niall or Nicky Shorthall, who's been doing really well? Yeah. I mean, there's just so many fires to put out. Oh, we forgot David Blanchfield. He's Darragh Corcoran, who's a wing back who's played in the county team as well. It's just really hard. Like, could you make a really strong case for James Stephens here?
I think you'd have to take a fair leap of faith if you think they can put it up to them for stages of the game, but I just think a lot of the class will come through at some stage. I was chatting to Jackie Taylor the other day about it, and he just said when they were playing Ballyhale, they'd worry about Henry, they'd worry about Chad, they'd worry about TJ, and then Owen Reid would hit you for 1-3. And that's the way it is. Like, you put a lot of focus on 2 or 3 lads in particular, and they still have the other lads that are going to hurt you, the lads in the corners that are really going to hurt you. Darren Mullen's back fit as well. I think Brian Cody is back fit too. They're going to be very, very hard to stop. I think like we keep saying, no matter who the Village are playing, that's Brian Cody against whoever. But Brian Cody of the Village on the sideline coming up against TJ Reid. I wonder if you ask Brian Cody who were the top 3 Kilkenny hurlers that he managed during his time, what do you think the 3 would be? It's a hypothetical question, but like I think TJ would be in that 3.
I don't think you could leave out Henry Shefflin. He's definitely in there. I'd say JJ Delaney would be there because, like, when he retired, he did say, wasn't he talking about him as the greatest defender ever?
Yeah.
And it's probably got to be TJ at this stage. Maybe before he would have said Tommy Walsh or maybe Michael Fennelly or someone like that, because I think Michael Fennelly kind of ripped up the script in terms of he wasn't really training. Like 2011, didn't he do 4 training sessions during the course of the season? So I'd imagine it would be among those few players. Let us know what you think.
I'd say, if I was a hazard a guess, I'd say it would be a joint first between Henry and JJ, and TJ will be third. That's what I would think. But I just think it's fascinating. He knows him obviously inside out, having managed him for the last God knows how long, and now he's trying to plot his downfall. And Brian Cody will not give it a second's thought about doing everything he possibly can to take the Shamrocks down. I think it's interesting as well, Shane. The Shamrocks, or not the Shamrocks, the Village have always had, for whatever reason, a massive Laois influence in their club. So I think Tommy Lanigan was manager when they won the Club All-Ireland in 04/05. Niall Rigney was manager in 2011. Cheddar was manager. Seamus Dwyer was manager before. Now he's manager again. Now they have Seamus Dwyer and they have John Sugru as well. So John Sugru is the coach. He came in midway through the season. This is the Village backroom team. Seamus Dwyer, who's been a selector/coach with Laois and has been managed the Village before. John Sugru, former Laois manager and Kilkenny under-21 manager. Brian Cody, the most decorated manager in hurling history. And Peter Barry's a selector as well. So like that, and he's going to be a Kilkenny under-20 selector this year. He's going to be a Kilkenny senior selector next year. That's a fairly star-studded backroom team now, by all accounts. But despite all of that, you're still taking a leap of faith to say the Village won when the Village won in 11 a replay against Ballyhale. Owen Larkin delivered what I've said several times, the best club display I've ever seen. A couple of lads are going to have to do that for the Village at the weekend, and like that day, Colin Fennelly and Jackie Tyrrell were sent off. I even said it to Jackie the other day. Said one of the biggest reasons he won that game was because you got sent off and you took Colin Fennelly with you. And he just said, Van Larkin always said, if you're going to get sent off, take a lad with you that's either as good as you or better than you. So there's things like that are going to have to happen, I think. There might have to be a sending off. There's going to have to be, a couple of the big Shamrocks men are going to have to underperform. But Jackie did say as well, and I thought this was interesting, he said, this is not about the Village forward line now. It's about the Village back line. And he said he doesn't think they'll be making too many plans for the Shamrocks forward line. He thinks they will take them as they come. And their defence has been very good this year. And he reckons the vast majority of them will stay in their positions and hurl on whoever comes into their zone.
I'd say Brian Cody did he come in halfway through the season because he didn't want to be there at the start when his son Diarmuid was being named captain? You know, it's easier to come in. I
Yeah.
know, I'm only joking about
Yeah.
that, obviously.
Well,
But
no,
it's-
and to be honest with you, like he came in halfway during the season when they probably weren't going well, and he was, by all accounts, he was down watching training and things like that. I think
You
Seamus
think he
Dwyer,
kind of invited himself in a small bit? A bit like Robbie Keane under Mick McCarthy. He rang up Mick McCarthy and told him he wanted to be a selector.
that's right. Or you ring up and say, I'm going to be a selector. I was involved, I good one for you. I was involved with the Borough under 21s. It's 10 years ago now. And we were hammered in our first round match. And it was the first time there was ever a back door in the under 21. And we trained the next Tuesday night. And one of the fathers of one of the lads came over to me and shook hands with me and he says, I'd like to introduce your new selector. He basically made himself a selector. He wasn't like a selector, but he thought he was, and he thought he was doing good by doing this.
Do you know, if Pat Hoban, who's now over Ballyhale, leads them to victory, that'll be 3 different managers. Obviously, James O'Connor last year and Henry Shefflin the years before, who've been involved in a 5 in a row, which is quite novel. I wonder, has that happened before? We've had maybe 3 different managers involved in a 5 in a row.
Jenny, generally, you would say it's the continuity of the same management team, wouldn't you? So I wouldn't see that. Can I just say something as well on the Village? The Village are to blame for Ballyhale's dominance over the last 4 to 5 years, because they beat them in that semi-final where Henry retired. Henry decided to go into management. He basically turned things around. A couple of lads were maybe not going down the wrong road, but mind maybe wasn't fully focused on hurling. So the Village only have themselves to blame for what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. That's tongue in cheek somewhat, but that was basically a defeat that turned around the whole mentality, I would say, in Ballyhale.
Yeah, and so Pat Hoban is over. He's from Mullinavat, Vegas, obviously. Niall Connolly, who's club secretary, talked about Brian Cody getting back involved, and he says Brian is very much involved in our club anyway. He was speaking to journalist Ian O'Riordan. He's a James Stephen man, and knowing Brian, it was never going to be too long before he got back involved in the club. And Hoban was talking about the test of character that they got against Tullaroan in the previous round when Colin Fennelly scored a goal after 38 minutes. You know, they were chasing the game in the first half, but TJ, Evan, Shefflin and Owen Cody, they helped bring him back. And Hoban said to the Kilkenny people afterwards, the Tullaroan game was a real test of our character. I'm absolutely thrilled and I'm delighted for the players, as it was exactly how we thought it was going to be. We played Tullaroan earlier in the year and it was a very similar game, while they were there with us all the way, and we just got a few points near the end to go clear. We won the last 2 games easy and we looked good, but that was a real test of character as much as our hurling. So it was great to come through. The goal was a massive score for us as it helped us to open up the gap between the sides. So this will be a 10th title for James Stephens if they could do it. Now, I suppose Cian Kenny going back centre-back has been a big change for him this year. Somebody that we saw playing as maybe like a floating corner forward at the start of the year for Kilkenny, especially at Parnell Park, then played midfield. Now he's centre-back. So I'm thinking, like a couple of years ago when Ballyhale beat James Stephens in that county final, when Owen Larkin was centre-back, you've got an attacking player playing centre-back, and there's no better player really than TJ Reid to sort of stand back with the centre-back. Now, and you'd imagine he's going to catch ball over Cian Kenny and then float away and then give Cian Kenny a dilemma. Or is it possible that somebody else will come back and mark TJ and Cian Kenny will get a different role?
I think Colin Fennelly went out to 11 at times against Tullaroan as well and caused them an awful lot of trouble. So they have, there's so many luxuries. They have so many luxuries that they can go to. They can throw a different task at. They can throw the TJ task at the 6. They can throw the Colin Fennelly task. They could throw Owen Cody out there. They can put Adrian Mullen in there. All players who play differently. I thought it was interesting as well. Jackie said, and I hadn't thought about it like this, but it probably is coming to fruition now. He said, if you look at, and everyone calls them Ballyhale for whatever reason, Ballyhale. He said, if you look at the Ballyhale journey, he said it probably started with Henry, in the last 15, 20 years. It moved on to TJ, and he thinks it's moved on to Adrian Mullen now. He thinks he's the one that's pushing Ballyhale forward now. And if you look at it, like since he came back from the cruise ship, he was probably quiet at stages when he came back inter-county, but then he had a brilliant year last year. He was in the Hurler of the Year conversation, maybe going into the final, where he had a decent final, but maybe not up to the levels going into the final. And like him and Owen Cody put 113 between them in the quarter-final. And he's their outlet. He seems to be everywhere. He's on the ball. He's putting in big tackles. He's physical. And I probably would. He's probably the player that they'll be looking. Him and Owen Cody probably the 2 players they'll be looking to lead Ballyhale for the next 10 years.
I'm going through the teams that have won it over the years, listed by years, and I'm trying to see, has anyone done a 5 in a row before? And on first glance, Ballyhale have done 4 in a row a few times. And there's maybe someone else, Carrickshock did a 4 in a row from 1940 to 1943. But it looks like this would be the first time ever that there's a 5 in a row in Kilkenny. Funny, actually, as I go back to the 1890s, there's a club listed called Confederation. Haven't heard of that before. But even so, that would be a big motivation for James Stephens. But Ballyhale are in their 50th year, so big motivation for them too.
Massive motivation for them, yeah. I think, like, if you look at it, for James Stephens to win, King Kenny's going to have to be dominant. Niall Brazel's going to have to put up a big score. Conor Brown is not going to have to stop a player. He's going to actually have to be stopped himself, if you get me. Like, he's going to have to be driving forward for James Stephens. I'd say, like, so Owen Guilfoyle, Luke Scanlon, they're all going to have huge games. But I can't see it. I just can't see it. Too many things are going to have to go right for them. Too many things are going to have to go wrong for Ballyhale. So it's Ballyhale by 4 or 5 for me, after putting up probably another big score, after putting up something like 223, 224, something like that potentially.
Yeah, Joe Butler says Confederation were a city club, I think. I wonder what the, who are the clubs that have kind of formed since then from those origins. Let's talk about the Kilkenny Intermediate final, Thomastown against Danesford. So this is, obviously the winner goes back up to senior level. And I just very interested to see how big an impact Richie Hogan can have in this game, of course. But like, Thomastown have been close the last few years. They thought getting Henry Shefflin in might help them finally get promoted back to the senior level. But as good a chance as any here. But Danesford looking to bounce back straight away after relegation last year.
Yeah, they obviously have Richie Hogan, Paddy Hogan, Paul Murphy, and they have a real good young player called Ben Whitty. Very, very good player. And I think they were missing, I think Paddy Hickey was missing for the semi-finals. I'm not sure if he'll be back. But as you say, Danesford are just gone down. Thomastown are trying to get up. You'll be looking at probably John Donnelly and John Joe Farrell will be there, two kind of big players going into that game. Hard enough kind of game to call. Thomastown were beaten well by Glenmore last year. I forget who beat them the year before.
Tyrone beat them a few years ago.
Yeah. Like, you could say probably the form has worked out very well with the teams that beat them. They've been very competitive at senior level since. But probably just go for Thomastown here. And if they can get over the line, potentially is with the age profile of some of the, particularly the 4 Donnellys, they probably would be a competitive senior team for a good few years to come. And then the junior final is interesting too. So it's the Black and Whites against Windgap, and that Windgap needed penalties to defeat Dixborough in their semi-final. I think it was last week. They won 4-2 on penalties. And in the second semi-final, Hilltown made most of the running, but 2 goals from the Black and Whites earned them a 1-point victory at the end. So that should be another kind of tight final there. One thing you'd say about any championship in Kilkenny in particular, it will be seriously hard earned, and there'll be fascinating games over the weekend. Brilliant weekend's action there.
Yeah, Cassius King says the intermediate game is Sunday the 23rd, but preview away. So apologies if we got that.
Sorry, I saw the all final. I thought it said the all finals been played this weekend. But listen, like the Kerry Championships a couple of weeks ago, we get the momentum building up nice and early.
Yeah, so apologies if we got that wrong. But do you know what? The rejigging of some county championships, sort of the way that it has been done in Kilkenny, like Tipperary finally moving away to the I suppose divisional championships being linked to the county one, and you have 32 sprawling teams involved in the county championship. Moving Tipperary to 4 groups of 4 has made that unbelievably unpredictable. And it's the same at Premier Intermediate and Intermediate level as well. You go the whole way down, and I regularly do it on Tipcast previewing the week's fixtures. And it's, you really couldn't pick it. And I hope that's going to be the way across the board as we go more and more toward that standardized type of county championship.
Oh, I'd agree with you too. I think it's really cutthroat in particular. And I put it this way, every place is earned at the top table. Every place is earned. We're gone that way in Offaly, thank God, where now they had it at 8 senior teams, and it was really cutthroat. Like, anybody could beat anybody in a given day. They've extended it to 10, which means they can be the odd, bogey here or there, or lopsided games. But I think I'd put it this way, we've been way more competitive at Leinster intermediate and junior level as a result of it, because there's a higher ranked team going in. And I think that, like, I played Senior B with Burr this year. We were beaten by Drumcullen in the first game by 3 points, comprehensively enough. They ended up getting relegated, and we ended up in a semi-final. There's just, you could throw a blanket over a load of teams in all the championships, and that's what you want, competitive championships where you can't call winners.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to read out that comment there?
Yeah, Martin Costello just says 5 has never been done in Kilkenny. Ballyhale going for 5 in a row, equal in Tullaroan at the top of the roll of honour with 20 titles. And as he said, it's their 50th anniversary. Some great detail here about Confederation. Martin Costello as well. Confederation was one of many clubs that came and went in Kilkenny City, as far as you know. They were on the John Street side of town, which would currently be O'Loughlin Gales. And Joe Butler just says, old city clubs included Erin's Own, Aero, Confederation. City clubs now are James Stephens, Dixborough, and O'Loughlin Gales. Great history and knowledge there of hurling in around the city in Kilkenny.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk Limerick now, because the county semi-finals are on this weekend. Look, I suppose part of us would probably be thinking that the Pierce against South Liberties is going to be slightly one-sided. I think it was a bit of a shock beating Patrickswell last weekend. But I suppose when you look at Patrickswell just having been motoring fully this year, Keane Lynch not being involved is obviously taking a huge amount away from them. But South Liberties, I think it's the first county semi-final in, was it 37 years we've been saying? I mean, so that's a fantastic achievement for them. You know, people obviously would know a couple of the main players they have: Barry Nash, Brian Ryan, who was recently on the county panel, his brother Tom, who was on it before that as well, Anthony Nash, who of course has transferred up from Kanturk in the last couple of years. But the quality, especially in the forward line of this team in the Pierce, it's really, really difficult to see how South Liberties can put up enough scores.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. They obviously only played that quarterfinal last weekend, so they're still on probably a bit of a high, and I'm sure they probably celebrated it because it was, as I said on the show, it was the first time someone coming from the B into the A since they changed that they actually had won a quarterfinal. So I'm sure they enjoyed that. There's obviously, it was a kind of a dour, tough game as well. They came out by 2 points. So they're probably not like 100% going into this weekend, but they also are very definitely battle hardened and have come through a lot of tight games. They were lucky to even make it to the quarterfinals. I think they needed another result to go their way in the last round, and it did. And they're on a bit of a crest of a wave, but they're coming up against a monster. Like, really, they're coming up against a monster. Go through, like, the Pierce have, to the best of my knowledge anyway, have everybody available to them that they can, all the big names. Peter Casey hopping off the sod after missing nearly all of the year with Limerick. Mike Casey has played very little club hurling the last couple of years. Will O'Donoghue obviously is the enforcer with Limerick, and there are many, many more. You talk about Ronan Lynch, Kevin Downs,
Adrian Breen,
David Dempsey. You know, like, they're
go on. And these players can do it both on the ground and in the air. I mean, that's the thing about, like, if Peter Casey doesn't kill you with his speed and his turn of foot and all that kind of stuff, David Dempsey will snap a ball over you and you know, find a way towards the back of the net. And they've even lost players like, you know, Shane Dowling, of course, has had injuries in the last couple of years, and he has reappeared for his second team. But they've had to absorb the loss of him. They've had to absorb the loss of David Breen. And still in all, they're as good as they are. So it's going to be really difficult to see a win for South Liberties here. Kilmallock and Doon, however, you throw a blanket over the two of them here. I know Kilmallock are county champions, but I really can't separate the two of them.
Yeah, I don't, like, Kilmallock only got going last year at the quarterfinal stage. They were nearly beaten in the quarterfinal last year, weren't they? And then they turned it around and were really, really impressive thereafter. They haven't really impressed hugely this year, but I think it was Fintan O'Toole said it on the Monday show. They do have a nice few guys around that 26 with Limerick now. When you look at it, Micheál Houlihan was brought in for one game to the 26 last year. Aaron Costello is there. Oisin O'Reilly is there. Graham Mulcahy is obviously on the Limerick starting team.
Robbie Hanley.
Like, they have a nice nucleus around that Limerick squad that have gotten a lot of exposure at county level. They obviously have Conor Hanley-Clark as well. Actually, not 100% sure whether he's playing in the goals or whether he's playing outfield for them, which would be something we'll obviously know at the weekend. We've talked about Doon, you know, is this Doon's year or whatever, the whole way through. They've got serious potential. Obviously, Darragh O'Donovan, Richie English, Josh Ryan, Pat Ryan, like, you know, very, very hard call, this one. I have to say, I probably would be favouring Doon just on the back of a really tough quarter-final last weekend against Kildimo. I think they'll be brilliantly battle-hardened. I don't think they picked up any knock that I'm aware of anyway last weekend. So I think they're prime for this weekend, and I think they'll just about get over the line. But it is a very, very difficult game to call.
Yeah, if you look at Kildimo, like the game last week was 120-19, so just 4 points in it. But in terms of the scoring that was done from play for Kildimo, it was Kyle Hayes got 2 from play. I think it was Darren O'Connell, he got a couple, and there was 2 other players who got 1 each. So they managed just 6 points from play. Now, of course, they won frees, so that's not for no reason. But Doon were able to score far more. Now, Adam English, at some stage, he's going to lead this Doon team to a county title. They've never won it, which we've talked about a few times. But can he catch fire in a game like this? Assuming that the likes of Richie English, his brother, Darrow O'Donovan, maybe Eddie Stokes, who we've seen with underage teams, if they can kind of give them the platform, like he is a player that's going to be very, very hard to tie down. Like there's a couple of good markers on that Kilmallock team for sure. And I'd love to see how Paddy O'Loughlin is going this year. I haven't really seen too much of their action, but like he is somebody that's going to be tough to tie down.
Yeah, I also think as well, Jackie was saying this during the week about like county finals been played now. Like the weather at the moment is like summer during the day. The sun is splitting the rocks. There hasn't been very little rain. Feels
a little bit softer though. It would be a bit softer.
A small bit, but not like, where you're really getting bogged down and the smaller, nippier players are, struggling to gain traction in it. So I still think someone like Adam English, who's obviously a bit smaller and maybe more diminutive, I still think it's not top of the ground, but it's pretty good conditions for guys like that who are, all pace, all skill.
And they're all on county pitches as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they're all going to be in very, very good shape. I just thought John O'Sullivan's comment was interesting. The Piercing best team in Ireland when they're fit. Like, I hope
Ballyhale and Ballygunner.
Yeah, see, you'd love to see a little Champions League. What's your, if you could pick the 4 best club teams in the country to have to play each other once, top 2 play in the final? Are we looking at Ballyhale, Ballygunner, Ballygunner, Na Piarsaigh, and who else?
Oh, Schlockneil, in terms of consistency, would be in the conversation. St. Thomas's would be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Outside of that, is there anyone in the Leinster counties? I mean, look, Cool have lost the last 2 semi-finals, so I wouldn't be trying to trot that out at all. I think Kilmacud, the way they're going, and the fact that they've got some really good young players coming through, if they do make a breakthrough, and they still have Nafina to play yet, they could force themselves in that conversation.
I don't think anyone. Are we? I don't mean to be disingenuous to anyone, but are we stretching to find a fourth? Are there 3 teams that are a nice bit potentially ahead of the rest?
I think you'd probably have to give St. Thomas's their dues there, and Schlockneil. Maybe they're not quite at the same level, but St. Thomas's got so close last year. Yeah, I don't know. And get your comments in. Let us know what you think. Is there anyone else who could break?
I'd say it probably would be Thomas's, realistically. I'd say if you're putting the 4 in.
Can we really say put Na Piarsaigh in that conversation if they haven't necessarily won the last 3 or 4 in their county?
Yeah. No, I know you're going.
They won All Ireland in 2016, and they haven't won it since. So it would feel a little bit wrong to have them in there.
Yeah, you're going on potential. I think if they have everybody fit, I think potentially Na Piarsaigh and Ballygunner would be an absolute belter of a game. Listen, the Liberties will only love this. We're talking about Na Piarsaigh being one of the top 3 teams in the country, and they're not in a Limerick county final yet. So I think it's going to be interesting this weekend.
Yeah. So the Cork County final is on this weekend. Would you find it a tad annoying that they referred to it as the Little All Ireland for so long? They were doing well at inter-county level, and their clubs were collecting All Ireland club titles. The cheek of them to call it the Little All Ireland, I'd say. The arrogance.
Yeah, well, listen, that's a word. It's generally associated with Cork at times, isn't it? But the fact that whoever won that battle, was probably favourites to win the All Ireland at that stage. It's mad, like that's the way it was. That's the way it was for a while. It's obviously is it the first time in 40 years that they've met in a final?
Top of the head, I can't remember off the top of my head. I know it was a long time.
I have it in my head that it was 40 years. It's it's a fascinating final. They have Louis McQueen, who obviously had success with Mellows and got Mellows back to definitely a county final, and we're definitely around the semi-final stage when he was there, and he's coming down, and he's it's probably that penalty win over Immochilly in the semi-final has spurred Blackrock on to bigger and better things. Obviously won a county title a couple of years ago, and then he's coming up against Ger Cunningham, who went back it's 83, 39 years. Ger Cunningham is over the bars, and obviously you won't get much more of a symbol of the bars than Ger Cunningham, and obviously his son is involved as well. It's a fascinating final, especially with a lot of dual players involved with both teams as well.
Yeah, and I'm going through the kind of the 70s and the 80s here, looking at the amount of Cork teams that won the All-Ireland. Blackrock won it in 71, 72. I'll just name the latter year. The Glen won it in 73, Blackrock 74, Bars 75, Glen 77, Bars 78, Blackrock 79. And there's Cork teams winning the province all the way along there too. You had to go all the way up to 1982. From that, like between 71 when Ross Gray won it and 1982 when Mount Sion won it, it was a Cork team winning Munster every single year, and the vast majority of years they went on to win the Club All-Ireland.
Did the Village win one in the middle? No, am I wrong in saying no?
They did. They won it in 76.
Yeah, because I think I got that wrong before. So I think Joe Butler corrected me actually last year when I said Cork teams won all those All-Irelands. But there's a really good thought-provoking, emotive poll on the Cork Echo they're doing at the moment, where they're trying to find the best Cork City hurler of all time. So you're putting the Glen against the bars, and it's kind of, and obviously a couple of more in between there as well. But it's fascinating just to see. I think it was Patrick Horgan up against Ronan Curran, and there's loads of different debates and polls going on at the moment. But Flash just says Corkness is a true disease. I don't know if I go that far, Flash, but I'm expecting a savage final. I was chatting Fintan about this on Monday. There's a couple of players who have really stood out to me in the Cork Championships so far. Robbie Cotter is definitely one of them. Just think he's an unbelievable eye for goal. It's like his first thought seems to be anytime when the ball goes in around there, it's like, how can I get around my man? Remember we saw that flick the last day where he flicked the ball away from the defender. It's absolutely beautiful. Ben O'Connor then from a Bars point of view, I just think I can't believe he's still doing his leaving cert and is going to be playing senior club rugby this year. He's the prototype of what a modern day hurler or footballer looks like, and I think he has unbelievable potential over the next few years.
Yeah, you mentioned that poll in the Cork Echo, and I'm seeing one of them is Patrick Horgan versus Ronan Curran. I mean, geez, how are you supposed to vote between the two of them? Another one, Tomas Mulcahy and Ger Cunningham.
Yeah.
Cunningham hurler of the year in 86. Didn't Mulcahy win it as well? I think he did win it.
Oh, don't know if he won hurler of the year.
Yeah, sure, I'm thinking Tony O'Sullivan won it in, was it 1990 that Tony O'Sullivan won it?
It was either 1990, I think it was 1990, yeah, I think so, yeah.
I'm going to look it up here. And
it mightn't actually go back. I checked it before. It only went back as far as the early 90s, I think. So it actually mightn't be there. But like when you go through the players that those clubs have produced, it's phenomenal, really. And I think they're predicting this is going to be the largest crowd at a Cork final in the guts of a decade. There's a serious media hype around it, only naturally because it's just two really traditional clubs who have maybe gone through some barren times and are now back in a final against each other.
Yeah, he didn't actually win it. Yeah, Tony O'Sullivan won it in 1990. Plenty of other Cork lads too. There was a Cork final in the 70s where over 30,000 attended. Finbars against either Glen or Blackrock. I'm wondering, was it even closer to 40 or not far off it? John O'Sullivan says the media down here love talking up the city teams. Give it a few years and there'll be more senior teams in East Cork than the city. But at the same time, wasn't one of the criticisms of Cork in the last 10 or 15 years, obviously that lovely period where they haven't been winning senior All-Irelands, that the city teams had kind of gone back a little bit. So maybe this will translate to the inter-county team.
Maybe. Isn't Douglas now one of the biggest clubs in the country? Am I right in saying?
Yeah.
Douglas is essentially a super club as well. We won't talk about their underachieving at senior level because they definitely are for the numbers and the talent that they have. But there's definitely a lot of clubs in Cork that have the potential to be in the mix. This is just a really novel final because they're waiting so long for it, and it's a tough game to call. If I was to put my head in the block, I'd probably just about go for the Rockies. just with Alan Connolly in really good form as well. But like, it's very, I don't know. I don't know how much conviction I'd have behind that either, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like the look of Jack Cahalane. I think he's going to be a really good forward in the next few years, and I can see him playing in the inside forward line for Cork. Like, he looks good. Ethan Toomey looks good. You've named a few of the other lads. Ben Cunningham, Ben O'Connor, William Buckley. There's a lot of good players there.
Conor Cahalane, Damien Cahalane. Like, there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah, and Joe, for the go heck of it, I'm going to go with the Bars. You'll go with Blackrock, and we'll slug it out on Monday washing the whole thing up. Yeah. Okay, what have we to talk about next? There's plenty of hurling going on in the Cork Championship this weekend. Capitagle meet Moycullen, Portumna against Crockwell, Clarenbridge, Ardrahan, and Turlockmore against Oranmore Marie. So these are the preliminary quarterfinals, and there's a number of teams that have already gone through. A lot of the old regulars. Portumna and obviously Joe Canning and so on. They've been going pretty well this year. It would be great for them to get back to a quarterfinal.
Yeah, no, they have been going well. Did a good win the last day. They beat Mullia. I'm not sure if it was the last day or the day before that, but they've been going very, very strongly. They've definitely bounced back from, any disappointment of relegation. And I think probably one of the most pleasing things from a Portumna point of view is there's been a lot of new faces, a lot of under-20s staking a claim. All four of these games are interesting for different reasons. Capitagle, who've been in around semi-finals and beaten the score in semi-finals against the Moycullen side, who, not that they've come from nowhere, but like, they're balancing both codes really, really well. I think I don't know if there's that many playing both codes, but the fact that like they beat Mellows the last day, who have obviously been in county finals up until the last couple of years, in an absolute belter of a game in Ballinasloe during the week. That's a really interesting game. It's a side that's been there without getting to a final against a common team. Portumna obviously have been there. They're facing off against Crockwell. I think they'll sense that as a big opportunity. I think Portumna might just about come through there. Clarenbridge against Ardrahan. Clarenbridge are obviously in a county final last year, deemed as one of the common teams in Galway. Fancy them.
And had a massive shootout against Thomas's the last day, 420 to 417 they lost.
And they would have been disappointed with the conceding 4 goals in the second half. They were in pole position in that game, and the concession of 4 goals kind of hurt them. I do expect them to bounce back there. You have Turlock, who are obviously in the county final in 2020. They beat Thomas's, ended Thomas's unbeaten run. They lost to
Sarsfields.
They lost to Sarsfields the last day, but like, Niall Burke will have to have the game of games for Oranmore Marie if they're to pull off what I think will be an upset there. So I'd be Capitagle Moycullen's an interesting one. Probably just about go for Cappy, as they're called locally. Cappy, Portumna, Clarenbridge, and Turlock. Just about. And in relegation, you have Teen Abbey Donaire against Ahaskra Fohanai. And in the Intermediate Hurling Championship final, you have Meelick Aircourt against Killimer. 2 real mainstays of the Galway Championship over the last 15 or 20 years. Obviously down in what is presumed that's would be deemed the 3rd tier in Galway. Maybe actually it's only the 2nd tier because B goes into A. But yeah, Meelick Aircourt obviously would have a very, very strong history, having contested in some big games. Well, many, many moons ago now at this stage, but they'll be expected, or they'll hope to get back up to senior level.
And to remind anyone who can't remember, the teams that are already waiting in the quarterfinals are Loughrea, Tommy Larkin, St. Thomas's, and Sarsfields. And actually, as you mentioned, Teen Abbey Donaire against Ahaskra Fahina in the relegation clash. And we talk about Brian Cody wandering back into James Stevens and sort of, ending up as a selector. Matty Kenny not being involved with Dublin now. I wonder, as he sort of waddled back into the Altina Abbey Donaire club, and is he sort of getting somewhat involved? I have no idea, but I'm just kind of wondering as we're talking about it. We'll go through a couple of other fixtures this coming weekend. In Cavan, Cootehill are against East Cavan Gales. Mullahoran meet St. Joseph's, or Mullahoran St. Joseph's meet Pierce Oaks. In Armagh, the final there, Cagelov Jarrig versus Sean Tracy's. And then you might give us a bit of a rundown of the Offaly County final, where there's no Kilcormac Calahi.
This is the Offaly Camogie final at the weekend. So it's Burr against Shinrone. Regular viewer of the show, Andrew Sullivan, is actually the Burr manager. They pulled off a big coup in the semi-final where they beat the back-to-back All-Ireland Intermediate champion St. Rynas. But they're going to have to up their game again this weekend. Shinrone are going for the double. Shinrone obviously have a great history in Offaly Camogie. Burr are looking for only their 2nd county title. I wouldn't hazard a guess how many Shinrone have, but they have a lot. And they're looking to do the double, obviously, after the men winning 2 weeks ago. That's going to be a big game in Brennan's Park on Saturday. And if we go to the football then, Shane, there's obviously probably, I'd say the big county final to talk about would be the Dublin County final at the weekend. Na Fianna against Kilmacud Crokes. Paul Mannion, obviously unlikely, very, very unlikely to feature in any part for Kilmacud Crokes, but they still have Shane Walsh, their great import, coming up against the Na Fianna side. Na Fianna booked their first final place since 05, I think, even to get here. You would be watching this very closely. I've obviously seen a good few bits and pieces on telly, but what's going to have to happen for Na Fianna to cause an upset here? And it would be an upset. It would be a big upset to me if they did win it, because Kilmacud can just hurt you in so many places.
I think pigs might have to fly, really. I know, look, I think Na Fianna are a really good team, and the way they saw it out against Whitehall Colmcille in the quarterfinal was really impressive, because they were under awful pressure. They conceded a penalty. Johnny Cooper had to go off with a second yellow card. So obviously they were put to the pin of their collar, level game, lay it on, and they still found a way to see it out. But there's no getting away from it. They're up against a serious team here. Now, the beauty for Na Fianna is they did frank their form with an unbelievably impressive win over Ballyboden in the semi-final. Like, they were 10 points to 1 ahead at half-time, and Boden had only just scored coming into half-time. And you've got some classy players there. Conor McHugh, who plays full-back for the footballers. And let's not forget, both of these teams are chasing the double, and they're meeting each other in the finals of both hurling and football. I wonder how many times that's happened over the years. It probably has happened in several counties, but just off the top of your head, just to divert to this for a second, can you think of that happening before?
Not too many, Shane, being honest. There's nothing really jumps out. Like, you would have one club like Lockmore, or you obviously had Upperchurch going for to be in the two hurling and football, but the same teams playing. I think it just happened in Dublin. Did this happen in Dublin with it happened with Crave Kieran and someone back in the 70s or something. I think Finton might have mentioned it in Monday's show. I think it has happened in Dublin before, but it's not exactly the most regular occurrence.
Yeah, you could see the likes of St. Vincent's. They might be another team that have traditionally been fairly strong in both codes. Geez, get your comments in there and let us know, has this happened before in other counties, or when has it happened? It must have happened at some stage. Like St. Finbarrs were All-Ireland club champions in consecutive years in different codes. So they obviously would have been regularly contesting finals in both codes. Maybe the Rockies, or maybe they'd burst footballs in general. I don't know down there, but maybe they were also strong in football. Dublin, St. Vincent's. Well, if you can think of any year where this might have happened, Joe, please do let us know. But while we're waiting for people to put their comments in on that, like David O'Hanlon's very good in the goal for Na Fianna. Also, Owen Merchant is unbelievable at driving up from the back line. Like, will he pick up Shane Walsh? I'd say to my mind, he's probably the most likely of their players, because Johnny Cooper will probably sweep. And Owen Merchant has the legs to get all the way out the field. Like, as I explained last week after the semi-finals, Shane Walsh might at times be the deepest lying player in the field when Kilmacud have the ball, so that he can then punch through the lines. And there was once or twice when where Thomas Davis in the semi-final had somebody one-on-one with Shane Walsh, who was running in from like 50 yards out, and they just got burned, which, you can understand. He's a tough lad to keep into. But maybe Owen Merchant is the best chance they have, in terms of, like, he doesn't mind if he follows you out the field. He scored a goal in an All-Ireland final driving up the field, and maybe he has the pace to defend with him too. Because I wouldn't look at Johnny Cooper as the natural matchup. I wouldn't look at maybe Ali Fitzgerald. Now, there's DOD, who plays full back, who's very good, but you want him minding the square. Anything striking you about this one?
Yeah, no, a couple of years ago, I'd say Johnny Cooper would have been the man, but his legs are probably just on the wane a small bit, and he uses his head a lot more in the position I'd say he plays now. So Merchant will probably be the one, and it'd be interesting to see whether it's a man marking brief, or it's a let's try and put him on the back foot when we can. Let's try and get him back, even though he played quite deep in previous games as well, Walsh did. But let's try and maybe hurt him a small bit going the other way, shall we say. Let's have him defending potentially more than attacking, but like that's all in an ideal world. That's all in an ideal world as well, really. If the likes of Dara Mullen, like Craig Diaz, is going to have to be stopped from a Na Fianna point of view. Like, to me, he's the heartbeat of that Crokes team. He just drives forward, driving. And he's probably, like, outside of Walsh, he's probably the next most important, because how often do you see in games where, the last 15 or 20 minutes, and you know the game is in the melting pot, and Diaz with a big catch, Diaz with a big run, Diaz with a big interception. To me, he's absolutely huge for Crokes, and if Na Fianna are going to stop them, he has to be stopped.
Yeah, but like there's such a big middle eight, and like when they press you for the kickouts, like they did this to Thomas Davis, they just couldn't get out for maybe 15 minutes. They did it to Kula in the quarterfinal, and that was a real tight game. But there was times when Kula just couldn't get out, and if they pin in Na Fianna here, David O'Hanlon is going to have a serious job trying to get the ball out to his players out around the middle of the field. Like the way Rory O'Carroll, Killian O'Shea, Andrew McGowan, Diaz, who you mentioned, Aidan Jones, and Tom Fox sort of create that. They spread out, and no matter where you're looking to hit the ball into, they're nearly ready to attack it. And there's such a physicality to them. It's really tough to hold on to the ball. And then there's all the scorers they have. Like Shane Cunningham was obviously a key man in previous times, ends up on the bench earlier this year when Mannion and Walsh are both playing, comes back in the last day, and he's an excellent player. Obviously Shane Walsh, Darren Mullen, Hugh Kenny, Tom Fox. A lot of scorers. Really, really difficult to see this going anyway other than Kilmacud Crokes. But I'm hoping we get a cracker. I am hoping we get a cracker because this Na Fianna team plays some good stuff, and I've enjoyed watching them the last few years.
They have the potential not to cut loose, but they're back in a final now. Pressure is probably off a bit. They're a big club. They obviously had that great run when they had Geezer and Desi Farrell obviously and Jo back in the early noughties and late 90s. Hopefully they try and take a good cut off it anyway. And listen, not having Mannion to worry about is a big plus for them as well. But like I just see Crokes coming through. Like it's funny, a 3 or 4 point win for Crokes could be very comfortable if you get me. It could be them totally controlling the game. Like what did they be cooler by? Big cooler by 2 in the end. And by the end, really, it was probably a 4 or 5 point win. By the end of it, so I could see Crokes winning by 5 or 6, but it been maybe a bit more comfortable than the scoreboard suggests. Hope I'm wrong though, and I hope it's a belter, and I hope it goes right down the stretch.
And the other thing is they won't panic if they have a bad start. They conceded 1-1 to Thomas Davis and just bossed the rest of the game after going behind by 4. Last year it took them, was it 23 minutes to score in the county final against Jude's? No bother, they went on and won the game anyway. So just such a tough team to keep into. The Tyrone semi-finals are coming up this weekend. There's some tasty looking fixtures.
There are indeed, yeah. Obviously, we said about the Tyrone Championship being the most cutthroat championship out there. It definitely is. It might have started a lot later than everybody else, but the fact that it's knockout means that it's at the semi-final stage already. On one side, you have Clonore Rattleys against Carrickmore. So just an interesting one at Carrickmore. You had said this to me offhand. In 2007, the Natty stand was officially reopened at Park Columkill, the home of Carrickmore GA Club. After being initially dismantled, it was carefully pieced back together from the rubble of Crow Park. I know that Drumcullen in County Offaly also has a stand where they're the seats from, I think they're the seats from, 1 second now. Sorry, no. They're the old Hogan stand seats, I think, that are in Drumcullen and Offaly. Just think it's fascinating how things are redistributed there. That's definitely one thing is Carrickmore is known for. They're playing Clonore. Clonore managed to survive against the odds last weekend, grinding out a result despite having 4 players dismissed, 3 black cards, 1 red in their quarter-final win against Dunamore. Fair to say Clonore are capable of overcoming any type of odds if they were able to do that last weekend. That's going to be a really interesting semi-final. And then obviously on the other side, Errigal Kieran, the Canavans were brilliant last weekend, Rory and Dara. They're coming up against Dromore. So Dromore beat Killyclotter and Oma en route. Dromore are the latest club faced with the seemingly impossible task of becoming the first to hold on to the O'Neill Cup since Carrickmore did it in 2005. Isn't it amazing to think how difficult it is to hold on to the Tyrone trophy? Like, is that a sign of how competitive it is on one way, but is it a sign of, I don't know, it's like the Wexford Hurling Championship as well. It kind of bunny hops from one club to the next. Is that a good thing within a county or a bad thing within a county? And is it a good sign for the standard of the county team within a county that they've loads of clubs feeding in, or do you need like 4 or 5 really strong clubs going at it?
My opinion is that it's a healthy thing to have as many teams as possible that are pushing, because I think sometimes when clubs feel that there's one club dominating, there are certain aspects of some clubs or people within clubs who would sort of give up the ghost a little bit because they're like, we'll never get to that standard, and they just kind of play it a little bit more casually, and maybe they don't do absolutely everything to get to the next level. Whereas when you feel like you could win it, maybe you end up given absolutely everything. And then there's a real element of competition between different clubs and players within clubs, and a rising tide lifts all boats. So that would be my thought on it. Would you be similar mindset?
Yeah, and I tell you what, from a competition point of view, like literally everybody thinks at the start of the year they can win a championship, and that is not the case in a lot of championships. It's not the case, in particularly just obviously the Waterford Ladies Championship, the Waterford Men's Hurling Championship. You have a fair idea who's going to have their names on the trophy at the end of the year. Whereas in a lot of like the likes of Tyrone, likes of Wexford Hurling, Wexford Football, I think is something similar as well. Like if anybody gets their kind of show together on that given year, they have a great chance of winning it. But that's at the semi-final stage there. We neglected to talk about when we were talking about hurling, the Antrim hurling final this weekend. And that should be a belter of a game this weekend as well. So it's Cullin, I mixed them up, Dunloy Cullins against Rory Old Cushendall. That's in Corrigan Park on Sunday. Dunloy have been the dominant force the last couple of years. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, they've probably had, I wouldn't say an easier path, but they've had a comprehensive path to the final, whereas Cushendall were really pushed to the pin of their collar in the semi-final. Still hard to see past Dunloy at the weekend. Keelan Malloy obviously is a hurler that me and you have both waxed lyrical about plenty. How do you see this one going? Obviously, Cushendall were in All-Ireland Club semi-final only 4 or 5 years ago. I remember they were beaten by Thomas's David Sherry scored a last-minute point to win it up in Parnell Park. But Dunloy have been the dominant force in recent years.
Yeah, I don't know. I just find it really hard to go against Dunloy the way they've been playing the last couple of years. The amount of different scorers they have, the score lines that they're putting up, just the fact that I feel like, Cushendall are still an excellent team, but are they sort of coming a little bit towards the end with the excellent team that they've had in the last number of years? And I just don't see where they're going to be able to keep Dunloy out for the course of the game. Like Keelan Malloy, the amount of the quality that he has. Like, who would you look at and think we need to stop this Dunloy forward, and that gives us a great opportunity? The likes of Sean Elliott as well. Like, I just don't see where they're going to be able to keep them out for the entire game.
I'd imagine, Shane, as well, that they've won a couple of championships in Antrim. They obviously haven't won. They haven't won an Ulster title. I'd imagine that's something they want to get in a run. Like we would have played, Burr would have played Dunloy back in the day. Real strong, proud kind of club. But definitely beaten in 2 club finals by Burr. Not sure if they were in another one, but caused plenty of upsets along the way as well. I'm sure they are driven to get a good go in Ulster, get a crack at Schlockneil, and potentially get into an All-Ireland Club semi-final. So I think this will be tight and maybe tighter than results so far would suggest, but I definitely would see Dunloy coming through in the heat of the hunt, as you say yourself.
Yeah, and like Nigel Elliott, Keelan Malloy, Conal Cunning, I already mentioned Sean Elliott, like 522 they put up against St. John's the last day out, and I suppose that's where I'm coming from when I'm talking about it's going to be really hard to keep them out. Yeah, Hugh Paddy there saying Dunloy forward, Nigel Elliott flying it since his return from Oz, worth a shot for first goal. So for me, it's going to be a Dunloy 4 in a row, but hopefully we end up with a cracking game. Neither you nor I really care who wins the game. We just hope that it's an absolute cracker. The Kerry this weekend, Field Rangers against Mid Kerry, and Dingle will meet East Kerry. Dingle East Kerry, that seems like it's going to be a cracker.
It is going to be a cracker. Yeah, you obviously have Paul Ganey coming up against David Clifford. That they're the 2 kind of marquee names, maybe on both sides. But and you had Thomas Sullivan last weekend gave one of probably the best defensive performances. Well, defensive/attacking performances. He kicked 5 points last weekend. And I meant to say it to Finton when he was talking about him on Monday. Has there ever been a more skillful cornerback in football than Thomas Sullivan? Like the skills that he has, like. A couple of years ago, I thought he was a really good defender, and I still do. But his game has gone to another level on the attacking side. Like, if that man gets a chance to bomb forward, like, you're encouraging him to shoot every time he gets the ball in around the 45, and he rarely misses. I just think he's an unbelievably talented defender.
Okay, well, a player who scored a fair bit for a cornerback, even though you mightn't think he's necessarily on the face of the most skillful, Philly McMahon has scored a lot from playing big games over the years. Keith Higgins is the one that immediately came to mind because he was such a classy player, driving forward, was moved to centre forward for a while.
He was never a corner. He should never have been cornerback. It was such a needs must, wasn't it? It was like Seamus Moynett playing fullback for Kerry. It was such a needs must because they just didn't have somebody to plug that kind of important hole. So like to me, Higgins was always a wing back, a marauding kind of wing back.
But surely you're not trying to eliminate him from the discussion.
Oh
are you?
no, I'm not. I'm just saying. And maybe Tom O'Sullivan is a cornerback because needs must as well, because they're not unbelievably plentiful. But I just think he has the skills of he's the skills of a corner forward at times.
Yeah, Mark O'Shea obviously was always very skillful. There's got to be loads of others. Get your comments in and let us know who you think the most skillful cornerback in the history of the game is.
Good to see the role evolving. That's no longer just, well, there's still place for the old miserable lad as well. But you probably, if you have one of them in one corner, you probably need a real ball player in the other corner.
Like Lee Keegan has worn number 4 a couple of times in the last few years. Could we count him in this conversation?
No, I wouldn't count him as a cornerback. No, he's the vast majority of his career is at wing back. I just think it's fascinating that a fella can hurt you from that deep, at county and obviously at club level as well. Now, saying that, like, he's going to have to kick 4 or 5 again if they're going to beat East Kerry realistically. East Kerry, who have, I wouldn't say flattered to deceive, but given what they have on paper, they haven't blown teams out of the water, but they're still there. They're still there, and they're going to have to be beaten. I don't know about you. I sense a big performance coming from East Kerry. If it's not this day, the next day. And I just expect them to explode like they did in the county final a couple of years ago. Remember when David Clifford hit that back stanchion in the county final? I'm expecting him to explode, and I'm expecting them to explode in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, well, the Meath final is on this weekend. Summerhill against Ratode. Summerhill have lost their last 3 finals in 17, 18 and 19, and the latter most of those was against Ratode, who went on to win back-to-back in that period, but lost the intervening finals since. The relegation playoffs sees Centralstown against Navan O'Mahony's in Donegal.
Shane, that's fairly star-studded relegation final. In all fairness, 2 clubs that would have competed very, very well at let alone Meath level, provincial level, going back into the early noughties. So one of it was going to be a big hitter going down there.
Yeah, in the Donegal final, Naomh Conaill meet St. Eunan's. I'd imagine that'll be a fairly bruising encounter. I wonder, will Leo McClune be back fit for Naomh Conaill? I think he pulled out in the warm-up the last day, and Rory Kavanagh, obviously, we'll be talking about it on Monday. Will he be named county manager by then? Win, lose or draw remains to be seen.
Well, it's funny because Martin Murphy, who was over Portarlington, it had been mooted that he was going to be part of Liam Kearns' backroom team in Offaly, and it only started to come out on Monday after Port had done the 3 in a row, and then it was in the papers on Tuesday. But there's a lot of lads trying to keep lids on things, and there'll be a lot of announcements about X and Y and Z is joining this backroom team just when their club commitments are finished, or not even finished, but just when you have the county final out of the way at least. And if they win and they're going into provincial run, they'll have no problem being announced then, but they want that pressure off their shoulders.
Richard Hogan says, Summerhill sponsor, Michael?
Gordon Elliott sponsors Summerhill, and I know that when he was been pulled and dragged from pillar to post over that picture a couple of years ago, I know that Summerhill were very, very good to him, and I think each individual player actually wrote him a letter just to say to keep the head up and fully backing you and all this kind of thing. So yeah, he's always backed Summerhill very, very close. He's in Colentra, and it's about 2 or 3 kilometers from Summerhill. I think it's Gordon Elliott Racing on the front of their jersey, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, do you remember Paul McShane he sponsored a soccer team somewhere in Wexford, maybe, I think, or Wicklow.
Yeah, vaguely.
And didn't he have his face? He just had his head on the. I think he just had his head on the jersey. Ballintubber will meet Ballina Stephenites in the Mayo semi-final. Ballintubber beaten Brafey last time out, and Westport, who, it's only a few years ago since they were intermediate, they will meet Castlebar Mitchells in the other semi-final. So a couple of crackers there.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Ballina against Ballintubber, as you say. Connor, with John Mahan on a few weeks ago, just saying about Kevin McStay's son Connor. He's one of the mainstays of the Ballina team. Or sorry, he's nephew of he's son of Paul McStay, and nephew of the new Mayo manager Kevin. But he's one of the lads that's driving Ballina Stephenites forward. He's actually interviewed earlier on this week in the Mayo News, and he just said we're all training hard. The lads who are away are making a big effort to come down during the week for training. And that lifts everyone's performance, not only my own. Things are going okay, but there's always room for improvement. There were a few chances that there that I missed at the end. That was obviously at the end of their quarter-final. Momentum is going well. There's a good feeling in the camp, and we've had 3 good performances now. So we're looking forward to a county semi-final. Back where we belong, in my opinion. For too long, we couldn't get there, but this is a good chance. And he just kind of name check Sam Callan, Dylan Thornton, Frank Irwin, Danny Loftus, Kieran Boland, and Mark Brand have all straightened things up this year. So they're going up against Ballintubber. There was talk that Killian O'Connor wouldn't feature in their quarter-final over Briefly, but he did play, probably playing through injury, which is probably not ideal at this time of the year. But that's a very, very difficult semi-final to call. And then on the other side,
wasn't Sam Callan the guy who was called up to the senior panel this past year when he's still in Leaving Cert? Now I don't think he featured. Maybe he played a league game, but yeah, I think he's a very young guy.
Going to be really interesting to see what new names Kevin McStay calls in, and
that was the end.
Sorry, Shane, I lost you there for a second, but it's going to be really interesting to see who Kevin McStay calls in. Like, in fairness to James Horn, like, there was a massive amount of players used during his cycle as manager, and a massive amount of players were given county exposure. But interesting to see what direction Kevin McStay goes in, and whether he goes with a lot more youth. But there has been a lot of guys blooded through Horn's reign, so he's McStay is definitely not working off a blank canvas. There's loads of guys there. Then the other semi-final, as you say, Westport against Castlebar Mitchells. Castlebar obviously be one of the really, really big hitters, particularly over the guts of the last decade. Westport, I think, had the 2 sent off the last day. I think they had 2 sent off. They kind of nearly survived at the end of it. And obviously, Lee Keegan would be the driving force for them. That's another interesting one, a difficult one to call. And then in the relegation final, the Nail have been struggling, obviously without Tommy Conroy. They're coming up against Davits in that. And then the Wexford Championship final, you have Shelmaliers against Castletown. Castletown led by Ben Brosnan. He potentially could be marked by his former Wexford teammate, Brian Malone. Ben is still going strong at Wexford, and will probably hang on again for another year. And then on the Shelmaliers point of view, they're managed by the new Wexford manager, John Hegarty, and they got a really good import at the start of this year. So O'Gara is married and living down around Shells, and he's been playing full forward for them and making a big impact. You might have a quick fly through Cavan. We had Gowna on telly a couple of weeks ago. They're playing Killigary in the Cavan final.
Yeah, so Gowna beat Crosserlock the last day out, so that was a cracking game, and it was Oisin Pearson, people might remember, who got the injury time free to send them through. There was 4 goals, 3 of them were absolute crackers that day. And I suppose Gowna regained their composure after blowing a 5-point lead there. So they got a bit of a shock against Crosserlock. But coming in against Killigary, who beat Rammer United, who were the reigning champions, 2-7 to 1-9. Killigary in their first final in 51 years. Connor Smith and Matty McKenna scored the goals that day. Would you be more inclined?
Can you imagine, Shane, just quickly, what does it mean, like, for people who haven't seen a county final in a lifetime? Like, we're gone next year. It'll be 15 years where we haven't won a county title in Burr, and that feels like it feels like the end of the world here almost. But can you imagine, if you haven't been in a county final in 50 years, what the crack is around Killigary this week, what the crack is around Boyle, who haven't won one in Roscommon since 1927. Like, it must be unbelievable to be a part of that, let alone just to be a part of the build-up. You can't get lost in the build-up too much, I suppose. But it must be unbelievable for people that are just outside of the camp, that are just loving it, enjoying it, going, having their few pints in the local pub, having the crack, hopping off, lads. I say the buzz around the place is unbelievable.
Yeah, I'd say, I wonder, some of the players feeling a small bit of pressure because they probably can't wipe their backside without somebody making a comment about the game coming up. Like, to be fair though, in some ways it's the same for Gowna. They haven't won a final since 2002. They were in a final in 2007, they lost it. They were in the final last year, and it was taken to a replay where they were beaten by Rammer. So maybe most of their players understand what the occasion is like, and they're braced for it because they did it twice last year. But yeah, I agree with you. First final in 51 years. It's going to be tough for them. But yeah, you would hope that it's one of those things where, the way when a team hasn't been there in so long, sometimes they can end up kind of dying under the lights a small bit. But you'd hope that doesn't happen for them. They've never actually won it either. So that's the other thing. It's going to be tough for them. So
yeah, I think it's not even about the day, losing yourself in the day. I think a lot of the time with that, when a team just doesn't show up, it's probably the couple of weeks beforehand where it's been lost, where you've probably allowed yourself maybe get into the whirlwind of it all. So you kind of have to embrace it somewhat, but you can't embrace it too much. I remember Jackie Tyrrell saying before one of his first Kilkenny All-Irelands, he ended up walking down Kilkenny, the main street in Kilkenny on a Saturday and going around talking to people, and he was just like, and then a couple of years after, he was just like, well, why was I doing that? Like, it's just wasting energy, like going into an All-Ireland final, when same with a county final, you need every bit of energy you can. So you need to find that balance between seeing what it means to everybody and, getting a pitch for that, but also at the end of the day, you have to look out for number one and make sure that you are 100% ready to go the day of the match. You've been there, Shane, I've been there, where you land to play a big game and your legs are glued to the ground and you're just like, it's nothing worse. And then you're thinking in your head, oh God, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. And you start totally psyching yourself out.
I'll tell you, before the 2018 Club All-Ireland, I said I'll go for a bit of a walk in the morning before the game coming later on that evening. And I went for a walk, and I must have went walk for 25 minutes. And then I was like, geez, my feet a bit sore after all that. And started psyching myself out that I'd kind of, done too much and that my legs were going to be a little bit tired. So what you were saying there, you can find 1,000,001 ways to psych yourself out, even though, you're grand. Like, sure, how many times do you go to training after a long day of work, or you might have had to walk for 10,000 steps or whatever, and you're grand at training. But it's once it gets in between in those top 6 inches, that's when you're in a small bit of bother.
No, 100%. And it's amazing what goes through your head before a big match in particular. You do start, and that's why you need to be kind of bulletproof going into a game. I know it was Conor McGregor said it, but I think it's an interesting thing. He was just like, you have to know when you're in the arena that you have not cut any corners whatsoever, that you've everything done that you could possibly do, so that in your head you're thinking, I could not be more prepared. If there's any element of doubt, if you didn't go and get, a physio session when you should have had, you didn't stretch when you should have had, you're thinking, oh geez, I haven't every box ticked here. Then all of a sudden, and it's not that will affect your performance, but will affect your mentality potentially, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I might doubt whether I have the work done. Then all of a sudden, I don't feel I can get to this ball. I don't feel like my man is running around me for the first goal, and you're like, oh, that's it, so another year gone. Or do you know what I mean? It's amazing what goes on in your head.
Yeah, and it's funny then, other years you can go, or other times you can go into, I don't know, a league match or maybe an early round championship match knowing you haven't done the work, or maybe, you had a sneaky Swifty or something in the week, and yet every ball just comes to your hand.
Yeah, it's
and
funny,
you're wondering,
yeah.
So sometimes there can be no rhyme or reason to it. The down finals on this weekend, Kilcoo, Warrenpoint. Kilcoo are bidding for a 10 county title in 11 years there. And like, they had players that headed away for the summer after winning the All-Ireland. Ryan Johnson, Caleb Doherty, Dylan Ward, they headed away. Younger players like Tiernan Fetz, Callum Rogers, and McDara Hines, they saw regular game time. So that probably all stood to them. Of course, a man we've chatted to on the show here before, Conleth Gilligan, who's going to be at our coaching clinic in St. Gall's in Belfast at the end of the month, along with a fairly stellar cast of Peter Donnelly of Tyrone and Malachy O'Rourke, who's, of course, managed Monaghan and Fermanagh. Anyway, Conleth is over the Kilcoo team. They still have Mickey Moran, who left after 3 years, involved to some degree. He's been
really? I didn't realise that. Okay, so he's still yeah.
He's scouting away at the matches. So one of the other joint manager, whose name escapes me at the moment, he was kind of talking about it recently. But it's a big ask for Warrenpoint here. Like, Kilcoo have had their warning. They were basically staring defeat in the face at a penalty shootout. If a penalty shootout wasn't missed against them in the quarterfinal, they were gone, and they won it in sudden death then. But it's hard to bet against them here.
Very, very hard. Yeah, they were struggling early on. They were beaten in that league final, and yeah, they were within a hair's breadth of being out of the Down Championship. Now they've totally turned the corner. Really impressive in the semi-final, and yeah, very hard to see them. Very hard to see them beaten here. You'd say you've had their scare. And yeah, I think they'll fancy their chances of going on the run again, especially if they can get over the line on Sunday.
Yeah, Waterford quarterfinals: Nair against Bricky Rangers, Rathgormack Portlaw, Galtier against Clashmore Kinsale-Beg, Kilrossantee meet Ballynacorty, in Clare, Ennistimon meet Kilmurray Bricken, and Éire Ógur against Corofin. That's semi-finals. Monaghan then you might run through.
Yeah, I will indeed. Obviously, Éire Óg are looking to do that double as well, where they're trying to get into the football final, having booked their place in the hurling final. Monaghan is at the final stage. It's Scottstown, who have been the real standard bearers in recent years, coming up against Ballybay Pierce's So Ballybay beat Scottstown in the group stages, but Scottstown have bounced back since then. Sunday will be the 10th consecutive senior county final for Scottstown, which is some gone. Manager Colin Mackery said, "We know Ballybay are another step up because they have marquee forwards. Paul Finley is pulling the strings, Jap as he's referred to here. The McGuinnesses, Shane and Christopher are really on fire. We have to figure that out and get ready." Obviously last year Scottstown lost out narrowly, or I should say in Ulster they lost out narrowly in the 2015 and 2018 finals to Crossmaglen and Naomh Connell respectively, and I'm sure they'd love another crack at Kilcoo and the Glen potentially and the likes in Ulster. It's amazing to think, like, Paul Finley's retired from Monaghan a long time and he's still going strong for Ballybay. Like as sweet a left foot as you will ever see.
Sweet as a nut there, Joey.
Absolutely sweet. Beautiful left foot. Like, I just must check here when he actually retired from county level. You might just fly through another couple of county finals, but he's retired from county quite a while, I would say, and still going strong with the club.
Yeah, St. Mary's will meet Turlestrane in the Sligo final. So Mary's last won it in 2015. Turlestrane had won every single title since. So no doubt they'd like to dethrone him this time out. The Tipperary County Football Final is on. That's Clonmel Commercials, who lost the county semi-final in hurling to Killawan last weekend up against Clonmel Commercials. So Clonmel are chasing title number 20 against the Church, who are looking for their first ever. Last year, Clonmel beat their opposition twice in the championship. And I think the gap narrowed in the second time, but still, I mean, you're looking at a forward line that has the likes of Jack Kennedy, Conal Kennedy, Michael Quinlivan. You've got Seamus Kennedy probably anchoring the defence. There's too much class in Clonmel to really think that they're not going to win this game here. In the intermediate tip football final, Ballina will meet Mullinahone. So it's actually interesting here that a clash of high-profile fixtures mean Ballina will be without their goalkeeper, Jack Brady, for this match. He plays League of Ireland soccer with Treaty United in Limerick, who are themselves in a first-ever FAI Cup semi-final away to Derry City, which kicks off at 2 p.m, an hour after the Gaelic football match, which is as little as 187 miles away in Thurles. So they'll obviously be down him. In Louth, RD will face Newtown Blues in the county final. The London final sees Fulham Irish against St. Kieran's. And in Leitrim, Mohill will meet St. Mary's with the cup up for grabs.
Some amount of games, some amount of county finals, isn't it? This is, I think, between this weekend and next weekend is the busiest weekend of club action. There are literally county finals left, right and centre. Hopefully the games on TV this weekend are crackers, and going down to Kilkenny on Sunday. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to Monday's show, where we'll have so much to go through again. And there'll be a lot of people in really good form on Monday when we're doing the show, and there'll be a lot of people in very, very bad form, and that's the nature of the club championships.
It absolutely is. So keep an eye out for the show on Monday. If you want to get the audio podcast, it's on Patreon. And as I said already, we've got the coaching clinics coming up in the coming weeks. We've got the one in Longford this weekend, going to be a cracker. Naas, the hurling one next weekend is going to be brilliant. We also have a couple more coming towards the end of the month. They're going to be on in St. Gall's and also in Moneygall and Tipperary. So it's star-studded casts all the way. Please do join us for that. If you're a patron, you can get a 20% discount, which more or less cancels out the cost of it every month, which is just a $5 where you get all the audio podcasts. Michael, thanks very much. We'll do it again on Monday.
Lastly, Shane, if there's anybody around Borough tonight reading in the hurling years, star-studded cast, only €20 for a ticket. By all means, drop in. Should be great crack tonight in the County Arms Hotel. Cheers, Shane.
Best of luck and chat to you all on Monday.